Hello everyone, DM Gashbad here. Like many of you, I was under stay-at-home orders for a while during the coronavirus outbreak, so I started looking at solo play miniature games. At first I was looking at Warhammer Quest, but then I started moving further afield. I was looking at things like Rangers of Shadowdeep, Perilous Tales, Doctor Who Exterminate, Marvel Crisis Protocol, even Age of Sigmar. But then when I was looking into all that, I stumbled across the old Warhammer Skirmish booklet. This is an old 6th edition Warhammer supplement that was released by Games Workshop. It's a series of small one-off scenarios that go with their Warhammer Skirmish rules that were printed in the back of the 6th edition rulebook, basically Mordheim. And 2 of them are solo play, or have solo play options. Not only that, but a bunch of them, the options for one of the players, one or both of the players, are so simple that I think a lot of them can be very easily turned into solo play scenarios. So I started working on some of those. Of course, then things started looking a little bit better and places started reopening, and I thought, well, my moment for solo play is come and gone. But guess what? Things got a lot worse here in California, so the gaming group still isn't ready to start our games in person, and so now is the time to run through these solo games. Just to let you know, I haven't given up on the idea of going back to some of those other games, but we're going to start with this first. My initial intent was to use the 6th edition rules and scenarios with my 8th edition army, so simply use the 8th edition army books for use in these scenarios. And I think you still could do that without much difficulty. The 8th edition and 6th edition rules really aren't that different. But I kept running into little questions and little things, and so eventually I went out into the garage and I found out that luckily 6th edition was about the time where I actually started collecting all the rulebooks, so I'm just going to use straight 6th edition rules. Where possible, I will go into the changes between 6th and 8th edition. But to get things started, the first scenario that I'm going to do is called Bones to Pick. In this scenario, there's been a big battle, and your force has been separated from the rest of the army, and they're trying to go across no man's land to get back to the main force. Meanwhile, in the carnage of the aftermath of the battle, a bunch of ghouls have moved into the battlefield and are eating the victims and the fallen and the casualties. So your ragged survivors have to move across this area, this ghoul-infested no man's land, to get back to the main force. So this is a good one to start with. I have ghouls and I have my Empire force, and if you've been following my campaign for Isle of Elgonda, we just got into a big battle for the last round of the campaign, and a bunch of my Free Company militia and archers and things got killed in both of those battles. So it makes sense for them to try, the ragged survivors of those units to be moving across here, trying to sneak their way through the ghouls to get ready for the final battle in that campaign. So fortunately I have all the models I need for this scenario, but what I'm supposed to get is a couple of casualty piles. The Warhammer Skirmish booklet recommends 6 casualty piles that are about 3 inches by 3 inches. Thing is, that's kind of big. That's kind of a lot, and I didn't like their idea of just using a bunch of Empire soldier models, lying them down on a terrain base and painting them up as dead guys. First off, I don't think that looks quite right. They don't lie perfectly right to look like dead people. And I'm not exactly made of models. I have a lot of them, but I do intend to paint these for my army at some point. They don't make these Empire guys anymore, and so it actually took me quite a bit of time to get these terrain piles together. I had 2 pieces that I think would work right away, so I had those ready. I had the gibbet tree, the tree with all the bodies hanging from it, and I had a small pile of bones from an old Grenadier Dragon set. Just came with a pile of bones. I've used those forever. Mordheim games, objective markers, that kind of thing. So the rest I had to make, so I had to find some things that looked somewhat battlefield loot or corpse-like. The first thing that I did was that giant skull from the Shadespire Beastgrave terrain pack. I bought that a while ago on a whim. It's actually pretty neat terrain, and so I figured maybe a big monster got blown up and the ghouls are picking the flesh off of that thing. A long time ago when I set up that tree, I also made that terrain piece over there in the upper left, which is a series of open graves. My intention at the time was to make a series of pieces of terrain that would go with my Sylvanian orcs. I got distracted, I never actually finished it, but now is a good time, so I painted that thing up as well, and the rest I stuck together. So in the lower left center, I went through all my bits and I found as many corpses as I could find. Just bits of bodies, that kind of thing, that I wasn't going to use for any other project. There were some corpses that were being dragged or impaled on a corpse cart. There's some bits from the ghoul sprues and the zombie sprues as well. It's not quite 3 inches by 3 inches, but I didn't sacrifice any models I was going to use for anything else, and I think it's close enough. The loot pile was a little bit simpler. I just took whole pieces of equipment. I got some stuff from the Black Orc Sprues, Chaos Warriors, Empire Free Company, the old Skeleton Warriors, just anything I could find. Put it all on a small piece of plastic card, put some green stuff down, putty it up, painted it up, and put some flock down. That makes it sound like this was a very quick project. It was not. It took me a long time. Like I said, I was worried that everyone was going to go out of lockdown before I even got to use this stuff. But I did finally finish it up, and so here we go. So for the scenario, you get to pick 50 points of core infantry troops. No heroes, but you can have a single champion. I passed on the champion. I don't think it's worth the points. And as I said, because it makes the most sense for what's going on in the campaign, I went with 5 Free Company Militia and 3 Archers. In 6th edition, the Free Company Militia are 5 points apiece, whereas in 8th edition they are 6 points, and the Archers are 8 points apiece, whereas in 8th edition they are 7 points. So the Free Company are a little bit cheaper, and the Archers are a little bit more expensive. If I was doing this in 8th edition, though, that means that this force actually comes to 51 points, so I'm actually 1 point over. So I guess it's just as well that I'm using 6th edition. The good news is that as far as skirmish goes, these troops are exactly the same. There is no difference between them in 6th edition and 8th edition. They do the exact same thing. And to start with, the bad guys for this scenario, the ones that are going to be, what they're going to do is going to be automatically generated. We're trying to sneak by these ghouls. 4 ghouls are going to start on the table at the time. Points don't matter for these guys, and their rules are almost exactly the same. As far as Warhammer Skirmish goes, on the battlefield using the normal Warhammer rules, no, they're quite a bit different. But stat-wise, they are exactly the same with one important difference. In 6th edition, ghouls are alive, which means that they can march. If you were doing it purely with 8th edition rules, the ghouls wouldn't be able to march, and it would make for a much different scenario. So even if you guys want to do this at home, I recommend you allow the ghouls to march in this scenario, because otherwise I think it gets a lot easier for the good guys. So just a simple change there. Here we see the battlefield all set up. The game is played on a 24-inch by 24-inch board. You can see I've marked that out on my normal gaming board using blue tape. My Empire guys start on a 6-inch deployment zone at the very bottom. The thing about their deployment, though, is that they cannot start within 3 inches of each other. I guess they are stragglers coming in from all over the battlefield, and so they can't start close together. Their goal is to get across the table onto the top table edge. The bad news, besides there being a bunch of spooky corpses and ghouls lurking around, is that they can't march. So what I've done is I've spread them evenly across the table as far forward as I can. As I had to deploy these guys first, I wasn't sure where the ghouls were going to be. My initial plan is to not fight the ghouls. Ghouls are kind of tough. They've got 2 attacks each, poison, toughness 4. They are more than a match for my regular militia guys. The Empire do get a little bit of a bonus because everyone's immune to psychology in this game, so I don't have to worry about the ghouls causing fear. I put 1 archer in the dead center of the table. That's part of the reason I wanted archers, is because since it can't march anyway, I know I can always fire a bow shot. So 1 archer is in the exact center, and I put the other 2 archers not on the far edge, but 1 person in. So on the left you have a Free Company Militia and then an archer, and on the right you have a Free Company Militia and then an archer. And then I couldn't quite get 1 guy within 3 inches of each other on that front line, so 1 guy is down, hiding out behind that tree on the far right corner. The casualty piles get scattered around in the center of the table, whatever looks good, you can see them there, and then I put just a couple extra trees just for some added terrain, decorative effect, whatever, towards the top of the board. The casualty piles all get assigned a number, and I randomly determine on which casualty pile the 4 ghouls start. And so I rolled up the gibbet tree. So that's not great. They're starting kind of close to my guys. Would have been nice if I could avoid them for a little bit, maybe fired some bow shots at them. But they're going to make me deal with them sooner rather than later. In order to win, I have to get over half of my guys off the top table edge. So that means 5 of my humans have to escape. So the current plan is, along the flanks, I'm definitely just going to try and skirt past those ghouls and avoid them. The bad news is that every round I have to roll and see if more ghouls show up. They could arrive at any of those other casualty piles. But the last important mechanic I need to talk about helps me out a little bit, and that is that these ghouls are very cowardly. If there is a model within their charge range, they will attempt to charge them, but in order to do so, they have to roll equal to or less than the number of ghouls in their pack. That is, any ghouls that are within 2 inches of each other. So any individual ghoul in the starting pack will only be able to charge if they roll a 4 or less, because there's 4 ghouls in there right now. If there's no one within charge range, then the ghouls will simply try to mob up. They will move towards the closest other ghoul and try to come within 2 inches of each other. If there's no one to charge and there are no other ghoul groups that they can group up with, then the ghouls just move randomly. That's the basic matrix that I figured out for the ghoul behavior in this scenario. If they can charge, they will attempt to. If they can't charge, they'll try to move towards other ghouls. If there are no other ghouls, then they just move randomly. The scenario, like a lot of Games Workshop stuff, is a little wonky. It's a little hard to figure out what the intent was, and I have no idea if this is actually going to work out. Anyway, the Empire player gets the first turn, and most of my guys know what they're going to do. They're going to move forward. Those that can shoot will shoot. The immediate problem that I have is that militia guy right in front of the ghouls. He can't back up far enough away to not get charged if those ghouls are brave enough. And besides, that's really the opposite direction of where I want to go. It's pretty likely that those ghouls are going to get their courage together and eat that guy if he moves forward. On the other hand, if I'm able to kill off any of those ghouls, then the odds of them getting their courage together to charge goes down by a fair amount. But if I charge in all my guys and the ghouls just eat them, which is actually fairly likely, then that doesn't help me at all. So I decided to kind of split the difference. That one guy that really can't get away goes and declares a charge into the lead ghoul. If I can kill him, then the other ghouls can only charge the rest of my guys on a 3 or less, assuming no new ghouls show up. The rest of my guys just try to fan out and avoid that combat. So, if everything goes great, maybe that initial brave, bald militia guy can kill off one of those ghouls, then the rest maybe jump on him and devour him, while it gives the rest of my guys an opportunity to escape. That's the plan anyway. I'm going to try and help him out a little bit by having all my archers shoot. Unfortunately, missile fire in this game is not going to be real easy. Besides any penalties for moving, range, cover, that kind of thing. In the 6th edition rules, there is a thing where targeting a single man-sized opponent gives you an extra -1. And in the Warhammer Annual for 6th edition, the 2002 Annual, there is an FAQ for Warhammer Skirmish, and it clarifies that this penalty still applies to Warhammer Skirmish. So no matter what else, I am always going to be getting a -1 when shooting at these ghouls because they are all single man-sized models. So that means all my shooting needs a 6 to hit. So unsurprisingly, all my missile fire misses its target. So we go on to the hand-to-hand combat phase, and unfortunately my brave militia member doesn't manage to cause any damage to the ghoul that he charged. In 6th edition, you don't go by initiative values. In the first round of combat, the chargers always get to strike first. Sadly, the ghoul strikes back, manages to get a poisoned hit on my militia guy, but fortunately he doesn't take him out of action right away, he only knocks him down. Again, if you're not familiar, the Warhammer Skirmish rules uses the Mordheim injury table to find out what happens after you get a wounding hit through. 1 through 2, he's knocked down. 3 through 4, he's stunned. 5 through 6, just out of action, taken off the table. The knockdown isn't bad for me, because at least that means these ghouls are fairly likely to just chew up this guy instead of running down my guys that could actually make it off the table. So it is the Ghoul Turn, and I roll for ghoul reinforcements. Fortunately, I get really lucky. I roll a 1 and no new ghouls show up on the board this round. That is very good news, and it continues to get a little bit better in that the ghoul closest to my guys, he has an option to charge a number of different guys, and when you have an option to charge different guys, then you roll randomly to see which one they actually charge. He decides to charge the duelist militiaman that is in the way back, the one furthest from the start line, or furthest away from the goal. But it turns out he is too scared. He is a little bit worried about going in without the help of all of his friends, and so he only moves a half move towards him. The Central Ghoul is happy enough chewing on the militiaman that he's already engaged in hand-to-hand combat with, but the one next to him goes and tries to charge the archer, which is trying to skirt around on the left. Fortunately, the archer gets a stand and shoot reaction, another change from Mordheim. He does need a 6 to hit, but he gets it. He does manage to wound. He only knocks down the ghoul, but even so, that's fantastic. Now that ghoul can't charge in his round. He's got to get up in the next round. It slows down this whole pack. Good job, archer with the bucket helmet. Sadly, the last ghoul in the line does get his courage up, and he goes and also charges into the knocked down guy. I'm not surprised that he was brave enough to charge the guy bleeding on the ground. And with that, we're on into the hand-to-hand combat phase, and yeah, 2 ghouls tearing apart a militia free company on the ground. It doesn't go real well, and he is promptly eaten. So that brings my total of Empire fighters down to 7. So it is my turn, and we did not care for the sight of that. We move away from the messy stain of entrails where our former comrade was, and just try and skirt around and get towards that back table edge. Again, my shooting all misses, and we move back onto the Ghoul Turn. We roll for reinforcements for the ghouls, and a single ghoul appears at the loot pile on the far left-hand edge of the table. Now, one ghoul isn't too scary, because he has to roll a 1 or less in order to charge. Unfortunately, he is right there with all of my guys. That pathway was looking really nice there for a while. So if that ghoul does get his act together, it's going to cause me a lot of problems. In the recovery phase, the ghoul that was stuck with an arrow goes and stands up. The ghoul that charged the duelist in the last round is kind of off by his lonesome, so he does not manage to roll under the number of guys which are around him, which is in his case 1. So he tries to go after the torch guy but fails, so he just kind of stumbles off, following my group of guys at a safe distance. Unfortunately, the remainder of the pack, one of those guys does get his courage together and charges the duelist again. His friend is not so brave, but he is supported by the guy that was stuck by an arrow. He stumbles forward after the pack. This is not so bad this round, but next round all those guys are going to be together in a big group, and it's going to be much easier for them to chase down my fleeing Empire guys. Over on the left-hand side of the table, in true ghoul fashion, he does not charge into the midst of my guys. Instead, he's going to try and pick off the lone archer, which is kind of making up the rear guard of the group. He doesn't manage to make his roll to see if he's brave enough, but he's going to go pick at the edges of my guys. In the hand-to-hand combat phase, that ghoul must have been hungry, because he charges into that duelist-like free company and he tears him apart. He stuns him, which means that next round that guy is going to be another ghoul snack, most likely. He will flip over to just being knocked down, but it's not looking good for him. Speaking of my turn, that's what it is, and we want to get away from there, so all my guys move at all speed towards that back board edge, shooting as we go. Again, all the shooting misses, but the guy in combat with the ghoul does manage to flip over to just being knocked down. However, whatever training that guy has had has proven really valuable. All that ghoul needs to do with his 2 attacks is get 1 wounding hit, and then that guy gets taken off the board. Fortunately, neither of the dice come up as a hit, and that militiaman is still alive into the next round, which could really save the remainder of my guys. Because remember, if I'm going to win the scenario, I can only lose 2 more humans. So we're back to the Ghoul Turn again. It's time for the reinforcements, and unfortunately I roll the results where we get D6 extra ghouls. So one of the ghouls again appears at the loot pile, coming out from under the pile of weapons in order to eat my guys. Another 2 show up by the corpse pile just behind it. That's bad news because those guys are fairly well clustered up and can easily mob up and chase down the guys that thought their escape route was pretty clear over on the left. Again, the ghoul in front does not like the idea of charging that torch. I guess he's afraid of fire, so he fails his check and can only stumble after him. Another one is too frightened even to charge the downed militiaman, but the last one does have the guts, and that's probably it for him. He was a brave lad. On the right side of the board, we have some issues. The good news is that the ghoul by the loot pile is too scared to challenge the militiaman with 2 hammers. Unfortunately, the ghouls around the casualty pile are made of sterner stuff, and 2 of them jump into combat with Buckethead Archer. We are on to the hand-to-hand combat phase, and yeah, it was too much to ask for. 2 ghouls too many, and my duelist militia is eaten. And over on the left, the results are much the same. The archer does not get a stand and shoot because those ghouls appeared so close to him. The first ghoul goes and rolls a crit. That is when you roll a 6 to wound. So you get double wounds to see what happens to the guy. It ends up that he is stunned, and there was another ghoul in combat that hadn't yet fought, and that guy just devours the dazed archer. So that is very nearly it. I have lost 3 of my 8 humans. I cannot lose any more. All the guys on the table now have to be able to leave in order for me to win this scenario. So it is Empire turn, and it is time to run, or shuffle. The 3 guys on the left-hand side of the table, they are really close. They are right there at that edge, but those ghouls are also kind of right there. On the right-hand side, you can also see my archer and torchbearer tantalizingly close to that board edge. We are almost there. We just need these ghouls to be a little bit more cowardly for this next round, and maybe not have any new ghouls show up in that pile of bones that archer is trying to sneak past. So on we go to the next ghoul turn, and again I luck out. There are no new ghouls appearing on the table. Sadly, there are a number of ghouls that are within range to charge my militiaman with the 2 hammers. The first one fails his check and is not brave enough to do it, doesn't roll that 3 or less, but the other 2 are, so he gets chased down by 2 of those ghouls. It's not looking good. The last ghoul was not in charge range, so he simply moves to within 2 inches of the whole pack. Over on the right, the first ghoul is the only one that's in range to charge my torch-bearing free company, and he fails his check, so he can't actually charge. He just moves half distance. The rest of them form up into a big pack. They're not going to be cowardly again, I don't think, but it is not going to be matter because those guys are going to be out of there. So the right-hand side is looking okay. Someone is going to survive to tell the tale. And then we come to the ghouls hand-to-hand combat phase. We've got 2 ghouls fighting Mr. Hammers over there on the left. I'm really thinking these militia guys should start getting names. Especially this guy because he is an absolute hero. Both of the ghouls miss all of their attacks. So that's 4 attacks needing a 4+. They all miss. So it's time for the hammer guy to strike, and he brings down the hammer on that ghoul on the left's head. He actually puts 1 attack onto each of them. Anyway, the one on the left connects, wounds, and stuns his opponent. That went a lot better than it had any right to, and now I have some decisions to make. It's back to the Empire turn, and on the right, it's a really easy decision. Torchy and an archer are out of there. We're going to disappear into the mist. We're going to get back to camp. We're going to tell the boss how everything went. And we feel very lucky that we are alive because the people behind them, there were just horrible crunching noises. Over on the left, I have more thinking to do. So, there is a guy with a hammer and a stake that can get off the table as well as the last archer. So that means at this point I can get 4 of my guys off the board. 4 is not enough. I was under the impression that if I don't get 5 off the table, I would lose. And that guy being surrounded by ghouls, even though he's super tough and he's doing a great job, I feel eventually he's going to be brought down. So with a shout of leave no man behind, we charge into the ghouls. We're going to save Mr. Hammers. I do a bit of a crisscross here. The archer actually goes in and charges the stunned ghoul. The militiaman goes and charges across, and he charges the ghoul that's still standing. The thinking being is that the archer only has 1 attack, so he can just take out that stunned ghoul, leaving me 4 attacks to deal with that last guy. And that is the stuff that heroes are made of. The charging guy with the stake goes and immediately takes out the ghoul. Remember, chargers strike first in this edition. So that ghoul is gone, the only ghoul in hand-to-hand combat that could do anything, taken off the table. The archer goes and punches that last guy in the face and takes him out as well. So half the ghouls that were chasing me are dead. If these ghouls behind me weren't scared before, they should definitely be now. It is the Ghoul Turn, and their reinforcements. A single ghoul shows up from the cave at the tree over on the right-hand side of the table. That's fine. The important part of the turn is right now. I've got 2 ghouls on the left that can stop my guys from escaping. They need to roll a 2 or less in order to make their charge. One of them gets it. One of them, the one on the right, goes and charges into Mr. Stake. The other one is too scared, but all that ghoul needs to do is to kill that one guy, and I'm in trouble. Let's see if Mr. Stake can hold on. The big pack of ghouls over on the right goes and forms up into a super pack with the guy who just emerged from the cave. And in the hand-to-hand combat phase, we are doing great. The ghoul misses, causes no damage. Sadly, Mr. Stake also misses, so that is just a push. No one's going anywhere. We are still in it. But I have a little bit of a problem. What I really want to do is charge my last 2 humans into that last ghoul fighting Mr. Stake, polish him off, and then we can go and make a break from the board. Hopefully that other guy will be too scared to charge me after that. The problem is, in Warhammer Skirmish, there is an intercepting rule, meaning when you draw your line to charge into a target, if there is an unengaged model anywhere along that line within 2 inches, they can jump in and you have to charge them instead. There are very specific rules about having to roll under the number of ghouls in the pack in order to charge, but there's nothing to prevent this guy from intercepting. So I can do one of the 2 things at this point. I can leave Mr. Stake to fight off that last ghoul on his own, and I can have those other 2 guys just leave. I still don't particularly like my odds on that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take my archer and Mr. Hammers, and we are going to charge that last ghoul. Hopefully we can kill that guy. Mr. Stake can just hold on for a round or 2, and then we'll charge in and we'll finish him off before the super pack of ghouls shows up. So hand-to-hand combat phase, and we go on to step 1. Step 1 is Mr. Hammers comes down and just smashes that ghoul's head in. Just turns his brains into jelly. Mr. Hammers, hero of all peasant militia. So Mr. Hammers and the Archer turn around, we're gonna go rescue Mr. Steak, only to hear a terrible scream as the ghoul fighting Mr. Steak poisons him and on the injury table takes him off the table. Oh, Mr. Steak, you could have escaped, you could have had your life, you could have gone back to your farmer family, but no, you turned around in order to save Mr. Hammers. Mr. Hammers tried to do the same to you. It didn't work out. Poor brave Mr. Steak. And then we go on to Ghoul Turn. Ghoul Turn, no new ghouls arrive, which is again great news. Even better news, that lone ghoul that just killed Mr. Steak is not brave enough with just his lonesome there to charge either Mr. Hammers or the last archer. He does call over for his friends though, and that big pack of 5 ghouls is going at all speed towards my last remaining humans. We have a real short period of time to get away here. We're back to the Empire turn, and sadly we are not within 4 inches of the board edge, so we can't escape this round. We are done charging into the combats with these ghouls. We've been doing great at it, but I think our luck is going to run out if we keep playing that game. We are just going to move away, and our archer, I really need to think of a name for this archer because he's a hero as much as anyone is. We're going to call him Nicolas Cage because he kind of looks like him. So anyway, Nicolas Cage moves back, he draws an arrow, and he shoots that ghoul nearest to us, gets a 6 to hit, gets a 6 to wound, which is a crit. That ghoul takes an arrow to the stomach, probably leaking out a little bit of Mr. Steak as it does so. So that ghoul is stunned, in no position to charge the next round. Nicolas Cage may have saved those guys' lives. It's the Ghoul turn. A single ghoul has emerged from the cave again, attracted by the noise and scent of blood. The wounded ghoul that ate Mr. Steak flips over to knock down and tries to shuffle his way over to the big pack, which is running up real fast. But it is too late because Mr. Hammers and Nicolas Cage both make it off the table edge. And this is where I read the scenario again and find out that it is a tie. I was worried that we had just lost because I couldn't get over half my guys off that table edge, but it turns out if one side can't either eat or escape with over half the group, and we have gotten exactly half and half escaped and half got eaten, then it is a tie. I will take it. So some of our force arrives back in camp in order to tell the Empire, hey guys, don't go back in there, it's terrible, there are a bunch of ghouls there. It's not like Captain America showing up in camp with a whole bunch of POWs, but still it's pretty good. As for the ghouls, some of them died, some of them got fed, all in a ghoul's life. Actually, that scenario was really cool. I really enjoyed playing that through. I have lots of ideas of different ways that you can play it. Would it work better if you had a bunch of swordsmen with that parry save? Would it work better if maybe you have a big group of savage orcs and they just go charging into the ghouls, try and kill enough of them off so that they're unlikely to pass that courage check to charge you in return? The courage charge mechanism is actually really interesting. It makes you really think about whether you just want to try and avoid these guys and hope, or whether you are going to take the risk, charge into hand-to-hand combat, and adjust the odds in your favor. The game also could have easily gone either way with a couple of those rolls of the dice. If I had gotten more ghouls in the reinforcement phase, it would have been a lot worse. But then if a couple of those ghouls had failed their courage check and weren't able to charge at all, that could have gone better. I gotta tell you, Games Workshop did a pretty good job. I think that was a great scenario. I do want to try another one of these. There's a couple of them that I think I can scrape together the models to play. The bummer about a lot of these solo play scenarios is that they require specific models. I have a fairly large collection, a lot of different stuff, and so I'm maybe not in as bad a position as some. But even so, I find myself with a handful of models or terrain pieces that I gotta paint for each one, so it is going to take a while. If you're maybe looking to do this, the sad thing is, unfortunately, that it does take a little bit of stuff. You know, you need the 6th edition book, and I think you need the big one, because that's the one with the skirmish rules at the back. The good news is I think these scenarios were all posted on Games Workshop's website at one time. They made just a ton of them. I actually spent a good amount of time downloading them all, printing them all out. I put them in a big white binder, and then I lost the binder at some point, maybe 15 years ago. But I was able to find these things back online, so they are floating around out there. Again, there is an FAQ which showed up in the 2002 annual. There is a mechanism for hiding in the rules. I didn't think that would work really well for this scenario. I was worried that the Empire guys could simply wander around some terrain pieces, hide from the ghouls, make it a little bit too easy, but who knows, maybe it's not a bad thing to try, especially if you're actually running a 2-player and 1 player is controlling the ghouls. I think the other player might need the help, and so using the hide rules might not be a bad idea. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about this sort of thing, leave them in the comment section below, and I will see you on the next one.